Go ahead.
Hello, friends of the earth and friends of Pete Seeger. My name is Bob Horan. I'm a folk singer from New York City. I think of Pete much like St. Patrick of Ireland. St. Patrick is credited with chasing the snakes out of Ireland and Pete for chasing the garbage out of the Hudson River. I can't verify the former, but we certainly can the latter. Pete created a mindset to clean up the Hudson River through the influence of the good ship Clearwater. I love Arlo Guthrie's story where he says, "Pete, you're crazy. You're going to put a boat in the river and that's going to clean up the river?" But sure enough, people came down to the river and they said, "Boy, that's a beautiful boat, but wait a minute. There's shit in the river. We got to clean up the river." And a line from a song that I wrote says, "Good music and hard work make rivers run free." And my own story is when I was a kid, my dad would take us down to the water. And I'd say, "Dad, look at the river, but what's that stuff floating in the river?" And he said, "Son, some people don't know better than to not throw their garbage in the river." And of course, that changes the next generation with my kids. I took them down to the river and said, "Dad, look, there's fish, there's ducks, there's people, doing water sports." And all I said was, "Thank you, Pete." I remember when Woody Guthrie died back in October of '67, the New York Mirror printed an epitaph by Pete Seeger. It was titled, "So long, Woody, it's been good to know you." In it, Pete referred to Woody as having no peer. He did, of course. Pete Seeger was his peer. And like it was said of Lincoln upon his death, now he belongs to the ages. It can also be said of Pete that he lived his life with malice towards none. Even many of Pete's enemies came to realize that all he was about was love. As for politics, his was the politics of rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty by doing things to clean up the world. He'd begin by holding a potluck dinner. And then he'd say, "While you're all here, I'd like you to help me do something." And that's how he built the Sloop Club in Beacon, New York. I remember him telling a student body of Marymount College that we could feed the whole world if we gave up a little luxury. My favorite story about Pete, and like many mystics, Pete lived in the moment. When I was a newcomer to the Sloop Club, on Friday nights they would come together and they'd have a potluck supper. And after the supper, they'd move all the chairs back into a semicircle so they could have an area for the stage. I was watching all this activity. I said, "Wow." And suddenly I was eyeball to eyeball with himself. And all he said was, "We've got to move the chairs back." I said, "Oh, okay." And I started moving and I leaned my guitar case against a column and it started to slide down. And I went after, he said, "Whoa." I said, "That's okay, Pete. It's all right." He said, "No, that's your guitar." And as soon as the words came out of his mouth, he turned on a dime and went back to the business at hand. But for that moment, all that mattered to him was me and my guitar. And I think that's as much the magic of Pete Seeger as his music and his courage. That when he spoke to you, he spoke to you. You had his attention and you mattered. It was my honor and privilege to do 2 shows with the man. I got to say goodbye to him one more time on his 91st birthday party at the Sloop Club in Beacon. I'm glad to say I knew him. Indeed, anyone who'd spent a moment or two with him could say they knew him, because that's the way he was with everyone. He's been rightly described as the most accessible, famous person in the world. And in the face of threats to his livelihood, his freedom, and his life, he remained accessible and fearless. On behalf of the people of the earth, so long, Pete. It's been good to know you.